told me that. My mom was a Communist Party member herself, and well, mostly not because she was such a firm believer, but because to make a career in education, you needed to be a party member. She wanted to be a school principal, but she never made it to being a school principal, but she still couldn't get out of the party, and she kept paying her membership dues all the way until the Communist Party was disbanded. Because if she were to give up her party ticket, she would not only lose any chances of working in education, she would be allowed to get close to school, like 1,000 yards, and she would only get some menial job after that. It was like, in the Soviet Union there were no horror movies. We all heard that in America they made horror movies because life was so horrible. And but there was a joke that a Soviet horror movie was the only one that we had was titled I Lost My Party Card. That was a horror movie. So anyway, and the way it was described to us as children, that there would be an abundance of everything and everything would be free, money would disappear, there would be no need for money, we would do or take anything, whatever we need, because... closer? Okay. Because the things would be redistributed to each according to his needs. And some mysterious entity would be taking care of all those needs, and we wouldn't worry about anything, and what's not to like? It was like extended childhood. But then I began to see some inconsistencies in how the country was run, and some hypocrisy and corruption. And then I thought, but I attributed it to the wrong implementation of a good idea. The idea was great, it's just the idiots were in charge. And that's why everything was falling apart. And if the right people were put in place, then things would go differently. But even then, after that, I kept thinking about these things. I had a friend who was the son of the local party elite. And they were really nice people, they liked me, I was in their house very often. They lived in a building, like elite building, better than everybody else, and they had an apartment that was pretty good, furnished with imported furniture from Germany, as opposed to all the Soviet-made garbage. And he had Japanese electronic equipment, a stereo, and he had all the rock and roll records that I made copies of, this tape, and yeah, that was how I learned English, basically. Playing the Beatles songs and listening to music, and the way that music was only available on the black market, and you would come to a park and there would be some serious characters with briefcases sitting there, and they would have in them latest LPs by Pink Floyd or Deep Purple, and those would be like 50 or 60 rubles, while a monthly salary would be, mine was 120 rubles a month, and those LPs were 60, which means like half of the monthly salary. A pair of blue jeans was 120, sometimes 200, depending on the brand. The Levi's, Lee, Wrangler were the most popular brands, and those could run up to 200 rubles, which was more than average monthly salary. But people were still buying them. They had some money left because everything else was so cheap. Free healthcare, very cheap housing, and other services. But I'll talk about that a little later. So I thought, how come the people who were placed in charge of enforcing the idea of economic equality for everybody were making an exception for their own son and for themselves? And I understand it was done because they loved their son. It was out of the love for their children that people do a lot of things. It's like the highest human virtue, the love of their children. And then I thought these people then had to choose between the system that were placed to enforce and the love for their son. And that made me think that even if we redistribute everything equally, because that society that I grew up in was not equal. People were not equal materially, and they were not equal in terms of their power that they had. Even if we distribute everything equally and everybody is left with exactly the same amount of everything materially, the next generation of children would still grow up unequal, because different parents have different skills and different talents, different attitude toward different work ethic, and different luck even in their lives. And then what? Take away from the next generation and redistribute it again. And it's like an ongoing process. So how it can be done? Or we can get rid of the money completely and have everybody live the life exactly like everybody else, like in a barrack, for instance, like bring it to the lowest common denominator. We're all living in exactly the same barracks, on exactly the same bunk beds, wearing exactly the same government-issued clothes. Even then, there would be inequality, because some bunk beds would be better than others. One is in the corner, in a quiet place. Another one is at the entrance where everybody's walking, because there is noise there. So somebody would want to trade the bunk beds, and there is no